January 25, 1959, just 3 months after his election, Pope John XXIII stood before 17 cardinals in the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls. He had an announcement that would stun the Catholic world. He was calling an ecumenical council. Why? What led this elderly, seemingly transitional pope to unleash a council that would reshape the Church? The answer lies in 3 currents that converged in the life of Angelo Roncalli, currents that speak to Catholics still trying to understand Vatican II today. First, there was a spiritual and theological renewal born from persecution. The French Revolution had devastated the Church, thousands of priests killed, religious orders disbanded, Pope Pius VI died in captivity. Yet from this wreckage came an unexpected flowering. New religious orders sprang up. Apparitions at La Salette, Lourdes, and Knock ignited Marian devotion. The Basilica of Sacré-Cœur in Paris rose as a symbol of hope. In monasteries like Solesmes, Abbot Prosper Guéranger began a liturgical renewal, reviving what he called pure traditions of worship. Pope Leo XIII called for a return to St. Thomas Aquinas in Aeterni Patris and launched biblical renewal in Providentissimus Deus. Between the wars, theologians like Yves Congar, Henri de Lubac, and John Courtney Murray returned to the Church Fathers, rediscovering a faith that was revolutionary, not merely ethical. Some were silenced by Rome. They obeyed, and they would become the Council's experts. This was resourcement, returning to the sources to forge a way forward. Second, there was the existential horror of 2 world wars. The numbers are almost too vast to comprehend. France lost 1.3 million soldiers in World War I. Germany lost 1.7 million. World War II killed 11 million Russian soldiers, 5 million Polish civilians, 7 million Russians. And then there was the Shoah, industrialized death in the heart of civilized Europe. Roncalli served as a military chaplain in the First War. He saw how religion was manipulated by political leaders. He witnessed the mixing of peoples and faiths amid the carnage. The intellectual architecture of Christendom had crumbled before totalitarian barbarity. Most Catholics in Germany and Italy had gone along with evil or offered no resistance. The Church's 19th century posture, condemning religious freedom, rejecting democracy, standing aloof from modernity, had proved futile. Something new must be tried. Third, there was Roncalli himself. As a young priest, he had edited the records of St. Charles Borromeo's implementation of the Council of Trent. He saw that Trent, which seemed so fixed and unchanging in the 20th century mind, itself had been a great reforming council. It changed requirements for ordination, established seminaries, ended the abuse of absentee bishops. It unleashed apostolic fervor. Roncalli served in Bulgaria, Turkey, Greece, and France. He knew Orthodox Christians, Muslims, Jews, secularists. He helped rebuild the French Church after wartime oppression. He saw the plight of working people in Venice. Pastoral concern shaped everything he did. When he announced the council, he used 2 words that would define its work: aggiornamento, bringing the Church up to date, and resourcement, returning to the sources, not one without the other. Now, critics of Vatican II, including traditionalist voices like those in the SSPX, offer a different reading of this history. They argue that the resourcement movement, for all its scholarly depth, opened the door to a hermeneutic of rupture rather than continuity. They point to theologians like Congar and Lubac, who were silenced precisely because their writings raised concerns. They note that the Council's pastoral documents, intentionally avoiding dogmatic definitions, created ambiguities that have been exploited for 6 decades. Professor Raymond Marcin, in his open letter to Pope Leo XIV, argues that the Council's embrace of the thinking of the day reflects the very modernism St. Pius X condemned as the synthesis of all heresies. He quotes the young Cardinal Ratzinger, who in 1982 described Gaudium et Spes as a counter-syllabus, a revision of Pius IX's rejection of modernity rather than a continuation of it. Bishop Athanasius Schneider has pointed to specific phrases like Lumen Gentium's claim that Muslims adore the one God, that he believes require correction, not merely interpretation. Defenders of the Council respond that this is precisely what ressourcement and aggiornamento together make possible, retrieving the deep tradition to address new questions. Pope Benedict XVI's hermeneutic of reform insists that true renewal occurs in the continuity of the one subject church, not rupture, but deeper understanding. The tragedy is that both sides claim the same council, both appeal to the same popes, both love the same church. What St. John XXIII saw in those dark decades before the council was a church that had lost its way, isolated from the modern world, unable to address its deepest wounds, failing to communicate the revolutionary power of the gospel. He believed a council could heal that. 60 years later, Catholics are still arguing about whether it succeeded. Perhaps the real question is not whether Vatican II was right or wrong, but whether we have yet learned to read it as John XXIII intended, with both the courage to engage the world and the humility to remain anchored in the tradition. Without both, the Council's promise remains unfulfilled.